Okay, welcome back for Bureaucracy Part 1B. All right, so let's pick up where we left off. Now we're going to be talking about bureaucracies as implementers, and then there'll be some other things for next week for the last part of the lecture. So that's pretty much what we're about here today. The rest of the day here is implementation. So, implementation for our definition, the stage of policymaking to an establishment of a policy and the consequences of a policy for the people who it affects. It translates the goals and objectives of a policy, which are set by Congress, into an operating ongoing program. So you have to have three conditions to do this. You have to have whatever it is, you have to either create a new agency, and this will be Congress doing this, or assign it to a agency that already exists. Okay, which is what usually happens. They usually create new agencies. Number two, you have to translate the goals into operational rules, and you have to develop guidelines for the program. That's what the bureaucracy does. This is part of the implementation. And then you have to coordinate the resources and personnel to achieve the intended goals. So you might have to add people, you might have to hire new people, you might have to shift people around, or whatever it is. Okay, so there's a bunch of problems with implementation. Okay, so here they are. First of all, design. Number one, you can't implement a policy that's defective in conception. If Congress passes a defective law, it might be very difficult to actually put that into effect and implement it because it might be defective from the get-go. All right, there might be a lack of clarity. This is an issue that happens a lot. Bureaucracies sometimes have to implement vague laws. Congress usually passes vague laws like, hey, essentially, so this is just an example. The water, we need to have clean water. Well, that's pretty vague because what does clean mean? That kind of thing. Title IX is a great example of that. Title IX is federal Title IX, which generally deals with discrimination between men and women. And Title IX generally has to do where the issues generally seem to be are with athletics. So if you go back in my day, when I was in high school, the late 70s and early 80s, things were different, like in high school. So for things like track or whatever, the same. So it's not a boys track and a girls track. But for things that were different, like baseball, we had a really nice baseball field, and then we had a really crappy softball field. Okay, things like that. Now, Title IX did a great job for evening up things in high school athletics. So if you look here at Lambert, right, you've got a beautiful baseball field, and you got a beautiful softball field. Things have to be even in a way to say it. So a good way to say it is things have to be even. It caused lots of problems at colleges because what does equality mean? Some colleges said that means we have the same number of female athletes as male athletes. Well, that's going to be tough because of football, because there's no female football team, and football has 100, 110, 120 athletes on it. So that's hard. Or some said, okay, you got to spend the same amount of money. Well, again, you take football, and that's a huge amount of money that gets spent. And if you want to make it equal, there's not that many girls' sports to deal that with. So what they started to do is some colleges said, okay, we're going to take away men's sports and add women's sports and things like that. It's really confusing, and it's really vague. So just an example of some of the things that we're talking about. Sometimes things are contradictory. Give you an idea. ICE, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. They're responsible for welcoming people into the country, and they're responsible for stopping people from coming into the country. That's sort of a contradictory role. National Park Service, same idea. They are supposed to make sure the national parks are there for people to come and see, and make sure people can come and see them and take in the natural beauty and all of that. But they're also there to make sure that people don't destroy the national parks. So they're responsible for letting everybody see them, but they're responsible for making sure everybody doesn't see them because too many people will destroy the park. So it's, again, contradictory role. They've got to try to navigate that contradiction, and it's not easy. Lack of resources, again, problems. Sometimes there's not enough resources, either human resources or financial resources to do the job. The bureaucracy might lack the authority to do the job. To do things, and this is sort of a problem and a solution at the same time, administrative routine. If you've never heard of the term SOP, standard operating procedure, those are necessary. It seems like it makes things unnecessarily complicated. Red tape is what we call this. It could take forever. You got to, I just need a new Social Security card. I lost my Social Security card. But you have to go there, and you have to wait in line. You have to go to this window, and then this window, and then this window. And then it takes a while. It's like, well, can't you just give me my card? My name's in the computer. But no, they have to follow this process. So it seems to us, but they do that. It's needed because everyone has to be treated fairly across the country. So that's sort of the idea here. It can feel like red tape, but everybody's got to be treated fairly. Um, so this is also part of the issue here: administrative discretion. Sometimes they have authority. The administrators, the bureaucrats, have the authority to select among several options. And the more discretion they have is when there are less SOPs about the situation. And then just to give you an idea, closer to the public you are, the more discretion you may have. I always use this example. It's not a national level, but it's a local level. So the police, you get stopped by the police for speeding. That police officer has lots of discretion. He can give you a ticket. He can write you a warning. He can give you a verbal warning. He can just say, just be careful and go on your way. Whatever it is, they got discretion. And that's the closest to the public. The higher up you go in law enforcement, the less discretion that they may have in dealing with things. And also, this is a problem that we have a lot, is implementation may be difficult if the bureaucrat disagrees with the policy. So if you got a president of one political party and the bureaucracy controlled a lot of times by people who are supposed to be apolitical, but they might lean to the other side, they might slow roll or not implement the policy the way the president and the cabinet secretary directs because they don't agree with it. That is a serious problem. That is a problem that exists. Okay, so that is one of the issues we really have to deal with implementation these days. And the reason is, of course, since it's hard to get fired, there's very few positive and very few negative incentives. So it's so difficult to get fired, so there's not a negative incentive for not doing your job right, and there's a few positive ones because if you're a GS11 here and the guy next to you is a GS11 and you do an outstanding job and the guy has the same job you do and he does a crappy job, you still get paid the same, and it's too hard to get rid of them. So that's a lack of positive incentive to do your job, and there's lack of negative incentive because what are you going to do? You can't fire me. All right, a little bit more fragmentation. This is the last of the problems. There's 2 slides here, and then we're done for this part. So fragmentation. This is a big problem because there's so many times responsibility for policies and the implementation of policies are spread out through a lot of different agencies. Just to give you an example, when I made this slide, there are 10 different departments that administer over 100 different human services. You would think if you were a corporation and you were running smoothly and you were running efficiently, you would have one department that would deal with the human services. But we have at least 10. Just to give you an example, a couple of examples here. So basic welfare is a response. This is all human services. Is responsible for health and human services. Okay, makes a lot of sense. Excuse me. The housing assistant portion of welfare, called Section 8, is administered by the Housing and Urban Development Department. The food stamp portion of basic welfare is administered by the Agriculture Department. And the job training portion of human services is administered by the Department of Labor. So that's just 4 of them doing this. It is ultra inefficient, but it is what happens. Because, or just in a little bit here, lastly, 46 agencies were involved in counterterrorism prior to 9/11, 2001, 9/11, 2001, right? 33 different departments were responsible for border security. That's crazy. Reorganization makes sense, but a lot of times it doesn't happen. We're going to use the one example of where it's rarely when it does happen, and that has to do with after 9/11 as well. But why doesn't this reorganization happen? Because that just is inefficient. Knowledge is going to be dropped and lost, okay? It happens because of hyperpluralism. Too many entrance points. People don't want to lose their entrance points. Too many different clientele. In this case, agencies and their congressional allies won't let their agencies lose out. Nope, I like these guys. It's part of my committee, and we're going to deal with this. And if you want to get rid of them or combine them into something else, I'm going to lose power. Therefore, I'm not going to vote for it, and I'll convince a bunch of people not to vote for it too in Congress. Industries don't want to lose their agency. If you combine all this, some industry on the outside who's got a really great relationship with this agency might lose out. So they don't want to do that either. There are rare exceptions, and again, I use 9/11 for this. One of the rare exceptions. After 9/11, Congress created a brand new department, the 15th of those cabinet departments, Department of Homeland Security. And it was made to combine all of those things, like those 46 agencies involved in counterterrorism, to try to combine them all into one, so you have less less loss of knowledge and less dropping of different information. People don't have some. It was proven pretty conclusively that after 9/11, that concluded after 9/11, that there was enough information in various places of the government to have figured out what bin Laden was trying to do and what he was going to do, and attack with the airplanes, World Trade Center, all of that. So, but there were so many different fragmented pieces of information and so many different agencies that it wasn't all put together. So that's what DHS was made for. And there's still some issues. It's been combined. It's been made a little bit more efficient, but it's still not where it probably needs to be. But then that's the bureaucratic problem. All right, so that's it for this time. Next week we'll have our last lecture, and then we'll have tests next week as well on executive and bureaucracy. So be ready for that. You also have an assignment for today that will be due on Monday. All right, have a great weekend, everybody.